In the heart of America, where millions of lives move in silence every second, a single moment can change everything. A normal day begins like any other. People going to work, children going to school, streets filled with noise, lights, and routine. But then, someone disappears. No trace, no message, no explanation, just silence. And when local police reach the limit of their investigation, there's only one name that gets called: Federal Bureau of Investigation. A federal agency built not just to investigate crimes, but to solve the mysteries that ordinary law enforcement cannot touch. Behind every missing person case, behind every unsolved mystery, there's a hidden world of intelligence, surveillance, and relentless pursuit of truth. This is where the FBI steps in, not with noise, but with precision, not with assumptions, but with evidence. Because in America, when everything goes dark, the FBI begins to see what others cannot. The FBI is not just a law enforcement agency. It is America's most powerful investigative force. Formed to protect the United States from internal threats, it operates in the shadows of national security, cybercrime, terrorism, and complex criminal networks. Unlike local police, the FBI has no boundaries inside the country. It can cross states, track suspects across borders, and investigate crimes that threaten national stability. Inside its system, there are hundreds of specialized units: cyber intelligence, counterterrorism, behavioral analysis, and forensic science. Every case begins with one question: what is the truth hiding behind the crime? And to answer that question, FBI agents use technology that feels almost futuristic: digital tracking, phone data analysis, facial recognition, and psychological profiling. But even with all this technology, one thing remains the most powerful tool: human instinct. Because in the FBI, every detail matters, even the ones that seem invisible. Solving a crime is never simple. For the FBI, every case is like solving a puzzle where most of the pieces are hidden. It starts with evidence, tiny details that most people would ignore: a fingerprint on a glass, a phone call made for only a few seconds, a pattern in digital activity. Then comes analysis. Agents begin connecting dots that seem unrelated at first. Locations, timestamps, behavior patterns, everything is studied. One of the most powerful techniques used is behavioral profiling, understanding how a criminal thinks, what motivates them, and what mistakes they are likely to make. In many cases, criminals believe they are invisible, but invisibility does not exist in modern investigation. Every action leaves a trace, and the FBI specializes in finding those traces. Slowly, piece by piece, a hidden picture begins to form. And when that picture becomes clear, the suspect realizes something terrifying. They were never invisible. They were being watched the entire time. Working inside the FBI is not just a job. It is a constant risk. Every agent knows that behind every investigation, there is danger waiting in silence. Undercover missions require agents to live double lives, sometimes for months, even years. They become someone else just to get close to the truth. One mistake can cost everything, not just the mission, but life itself. In many cases, agents face criminals who are desperate, unpredictable, and extremely dangerous. Yet they continue, because every solved case means lives saved. But the emotional burden is just as heavy as the physical risk. Seeing crime scenes, victims, and human suffering every day leaves a mark that never fully disappears. Still, they move forward, because silence is not an option when justice is on the line. In a world full of chaos, most people never see what happens behind the scenes. They only see the headlines, the arrests, the solved cases. But they do not see the nights without sleep. They do not see the hidden investigations. And they do not see the silent sacrifices. The FBI operates in that unseen world, a world built on intelligence, patience, and truth. They are not superheroes. They are trained humans making impossible decisions every day. And while the world continues to move forward, they remain in the background, watching, analyzing, protecting. Because sometimes the greatest strength is not being seen at all. It is being there when everything falls apart. It begins in silence, a remote forest on the outskirts of a small American town where nothing unusual ever happens. But that silence is broken when a hiker makes a discovery that changes everything. A body, no identity, no clear cause, just a disturbing scene that suggests something far darker than a simple crime. Local police arrive first, but quickly realize this is not an ordinary case. The level of precision, the way the scene is left behind, it feels intentional. And when patterns begin to emerge in other nearby areas, a terrifying conclusion forms. This is not random. This is the work of a serial offender. At this point, the case is escalated. And once again, the responsibility falls on Federal Bureau of Investigation. Because when violence becomes organized and when fear becomes predictable, the FBI steps in to understand what others cannot see. A killer is not just committing crimes. He is communicating communicating. Every serial case begins with confusion. At first, the victims seem unrelated. Different ages, different backgrounds, different locations. But FBI analysts do not look at surface details. They look for patterns hidden beneath chaos. Time of death, geographic proximity, method of attack. Slowly, a pattern begins to emerge. The crimes are not random. They follow a rhythm, a structure, almost like a code. Behavioral analysts step in, try to build a psychological profile of the suspect. What kind of mind repeats violence with precision? What drives someone to continue even when the entire country may eventually be watching? In the FBI, this process is called profiling. It is not guessing. It is science mixed with psychology. And with every new piece of evidence, the invisible shape of the killer becomes clearer. But the most dangerous part is not understanding who the killer is. It is understanding what he might do next. To stop a serial killer, you must first think like one. That is the principle FBI behavioral units follow. They reconstruct the mind behind the crime, not to justify it, but to predict it. In this case, the pattern suggests something disturbing. The offender is intelligent, controlled, patient. He does not act out of impulse. He plans. Every action has meaning. Every victim is part of a larger structure. Psychologists within the FBI begin narrowing down possibilities. Age range, education level, social behavior, past trauma. A profile begins to form, but there is always uncertainty because the human mind is not a perfect system. And the more complex the killer, the more unpredictable he becomes. Still, the FBI continues forward because stopping even one more victim can mean everything. Every investigation reaches a moment where everything changes. In this case, it comes from something small, a digital footprint, a single connection between two seemingly unrelated locations. At first, it looks meaningless, but when cross-checked with previous cases, it becomes the missing link. Suddenly, everything aligns. The FBI identifies a suspect profile that matches the behavioral analysis almost perfectly. Surveillance begins immediately. Every movement is tracked. Every communication is monitored. The net begins to close. But experienced agents know something important. The most dangerous moment in any investigation is not when the suspect is unknown. It is when the suspect realizes he is being watched. The operation begins at night. Silence surrounds the target location. No warning, no noise, just precision. FBI tactical units move in coordination, each step calculated. The door is breached. Inside, the suspect is finally face to face with reality. There is no escape, no negotiation, only evidence. The investigation that began with confusion now ends with clarity. But even after arrest, one question remains. What turns a human being into a pattern of destruction? The FBI may solve the case, but the psychology behind it remains one of the darkest mysteries of human behavior. In every investigation, there is a beginning and an end, but the truth behind human behavior never fully disappears. The FBI continues its mission, moving from case to case, from mystery to mystery, because justice is not a single moment. It is a continuous effort, and while most people sleep peacefully at night, somewhere, agents are still working, still watching, still searching for answers, not for fame, not for recognition, but for truth, because in the silent world of investigation, truth is the only victory that matters. Not all crimes are equal. Some cases fade into history, quietly closed, rarely remembered, but others become legends of danger. Cases so complex, so violent, and so unpredictable that they redefine how investigations are conducted. In the United States, a handful of investigations stand above the rest, not because they were the biggest, but because they were the most dangerous. These are the cases that push the limits of law enforcement, the ones that forced the Federal Bureau of Investigation to evolve, adapt, and rethink everything it knew about crime. From organized crime syndicates to lone individuals driven by ideology. Each case left behind a trail of fear and a lesson written in risk. This is not just a story of crime. This is a story of confrontation between order and chaos, between control and unpredictability. Because when danger reaches its highest level, only the most prepared can face it. For nearly 2 decades, a shadow operated in silence. No direct contact, no clear identity, only packages, carefully constructed explosive devices sent through the mail, targeting universities and airlines. The attacker would later be known as the Unabomber. What made this case so dangerous was not just the violence. It was the patience. Each attack was separated by time, making patterns difficult to trace. Fear spread across the country, as anyone could become a target. The FBI launched one of the longest and most expensive investigations in its history. Thousands of leads, countless dead ends, until something unexpected changed everything. A manifesto, a document filled with ideology, anger, and a unique writing style. It was not forensic evidence that broke the case. It was language. And through that language, the invisible finally became visible. Not all threats come from individuals. Some come from systems. For decades, organized crime groups operated like hidden empires within America. Structured, disciplined, extremely powerful. These were not random criminals. They were networks with rules, hierarchies, and influence that reached deep into cities and institutions. Taking down such organizations was not about a single arrest. It required infiltration, undercover agents living double lives, gaining trust inside a world built on secrecy. One wrong move meant exposure, and exposure meant death. The FBI spent years building cases, collecting conversations, financial records, and testimonies, slowly dismantling structures that once seemed untouchable. But the risk never disappeared, because when you challenge an organization, you are not facing one enemy. You're facing many. Some of the most dangerous threats come from within. Domestic terror cases are among the most unpredictable challenges the FBI faces, because unlike traditional crime, these acts are often driven by belief, ideology, extremism. The individuals behind them may not seek escape. They seek impact, and that makes prevention extremely difficult. In these cases, time is the most critical factor. Detecting intent before action, identifying patterns before they become reality. The FBI works closely with intelligence networks, monitoring signals that may indicate risk. But the line between suspicion and certainty is thin. Act too early, and you risk targeting the wrong person. Act too late, and the consequences can be irreversible. This balance is what makes these cases so dangerous, because the enemy is not always visible, and the warning signs are not always clear. Every dangerous case leaves something behind, not just evidence, but experience. Lessons written through risk, failure, and persistence. The FBI does not operate in a world of certainty. It operates in a world of probabilities, where every decision carries weight, and every mistake carries consequence. The cases you have just seen are not just stories of crime. They are reminders. That danger can take many forms: silent, organized, ideological, and in each form, it challenges the limits of control. But despite that challenge, the work continues, because safety is not permanent. It is maintained through effort, through vigilance, and through people willing to stand in the space between chaos and order, even when that space is the most dangerous place to be.